It was never easy coming to terms with the fact that my friend was murdered. I never took her seriously when she would post things on Facebook like lol, satanic worshipping, session after school, you win, or even I shall sacrifice myself to Satan tonight. But it was so much more serious than that. It was so much more serious when she came to school with a 666 carved into her wrists. They were still bleeding, for God's sakes. During the day, she would write 666 in her notebooks and talk non-stop about her savior, her protector, Satan. During the last day I saw her, she never made eye contact with me, never told me of her plans. She didn't even speak to me. But all that night she got a Ouija board out in order to contact her savior. During the night, she finally got to talk to him. I never got why she was so obsessed with Satan. I mean, once I finally made it into her house, she was pleading for me not to kill her. I've always had a strange obsession with coffee. I'm not sure why, but I think it's the warm feeling of hot liquid going down my throat and into my stomach. I think it's the fact that it warms me to the bone. Moving on, however, I sat at the table drinking my cup of coffee. God, I love my job, I thought to myself. The grin on my face and with a cup of coffee in my right hand. I glanced across the table to my friend. If you're not going to drink your coffee, why did you ask me to make you some? He kept silent, a blank look in his eye as he stared at me. I shrugged. More for me. I reached across the table and slid the mug of coffee in front of me. I took one more long sip of my own cup, finishing it off in one large gulp. I returned to the paper in front of me, sketching a few things while moving on to the cup I had taken from him. I yawned deeply into my left sleeve, pausing my writing for only that. I frowned when I looked back up to my friend. David was his name, from what I recall. I glanced over to the TV in the kitchen, listened to the news anchor with some breaking news. This just in, yet another body has been found. I frowned. The body was found late last night, flowing down the little river. It had multiple lacerations, and had the word fear with the number 3 replacing the E carved into its stomach. Police are yet to let out any further information. This has been Action News, reporting to you live. I sighed after the newscast ended, looking over to David a bit tiredly. It appears they found my work, David. Now it's only a matter of time before they find you. I got up and walked over to the lifeless pale body. It had a smooth laceration, only surgical along the throat area, severing the carotid artery. I peeled his shirt off his body, while sliding a butcher knife from one of the nearby drawers. I then slid my gas mask on, brought the knife up to his stomach, and began to carve TH3 into his stomach. His warm blood spattered on my shirt, that severed multiple veins. My gloves had blood painted on them when I stabbed the bloody butcher knife into the wooden table, letting it stick. I adjusted my mask with my gloved hand and made my way out the back door. I sprinted to the woods behind his house while reaching for my cell phone. I dialed 911, having just thought of a marvelous plan. 911, what's your emergency? I responded in my tired voice. Yes, I'd like to report a murder. Okay, where's this murder taking place, sir? Well, where would the fun be? Where would be the fun in that? I turned around and whipped the phone towards the house. It wasn't far, so it only hit the grass in the backyard when I turned around and ran through the trees. The next day I drove by the house. The cops were still there examining the crime scene further. For who knows what reason. They'll be looking for me now. But that would just add to the fun of this all. God, I love my job. Thought to myself as I drove off towards the highway to get out of this place. For now. Everything went still. The cars all stopped. Not that everyone disappeared. If I were to look through the windshield, I would be able to see the still faces looking out to the road ahead of them. Not that they were dead either, just not exactly alive. I was the only thing moving. No wind, no squirrels or rabbits, just me, in the entire world. I bet if I were able to fly up to outer space, the satellites would have stopped in their orbit. I needed to go. Even if time stopped, that doesn't mean I do. I was a peculiar man. All my limbs outstretched in the parking lot, groceries still hanging on my arm. It should have hurt, my arms stretching out from my body like that. I was a peculiar man. Only at this specific point in time I was comforted. If I saw this at any other point in time, I would panic. I was a rather normal man, but I'm getting distracted. I tried to move on, and I did. But my legs didn't move in front of the other. Instead, my legs remained stretched out, but I moved. My still feet slid across the ground in any direction I should choose. I slid across the black asphalt. If I saw it, I probably would have laughed. Sliding beneath the streetlight, limbs still outstretched, I slid across the ground looking for my destination. Not even I knew what my destination was. I slid to the nearest familiar place, into the mall. I expected everyone to be frozen like the people outside, but I met the contrary. There was no one. I could see all the shadows though. The shadows were reflecting the movements of normal people, but no people were there. The shadows were grouped together, having soundless conversations. A shadow showed a kid upside down on a jungle gym in the playground, yelling silence to his friends. The entirety of the mall's lights were turned off. As my limbs loosened and I could walk instead of slide, I began to walk through the mall, looking for something. As I walked down the extremely long hallways, the lights that previously off began being illuminated in my path and revealed more shadows going about their business. I found a familiar electronics store and decided to walk into it. As I walked, a shadow walked toward me. As it did so, it rotated off the ground. From the flat shadow position, it made a 45-degree rotation so it was standing upright. As it stood, it grew colors on its form. It took the form of a man in a suit with a name tag. Hello, my name is Cross. The symbol looked familiar. Everything looked familiar. Everything was alien. The suited man walked toward me. His mouth opened as if to ask me if he could help me. But all that came out was a blur of static and jet planes. The man began to get seemingly annoyed at my confused face and walked away, turning into a black sand like gunpowder. I heard a door slam behind me. As I did so, the wind picked up the gunpowder and blew it into the lantern. It didn't ignite it, but rather made the lantern fall and ignite the wood. I began to run. I tried at least. Someone put life into slow motion. As the fire crept up to me, I began to scream. What came out was the opposite. I heard laughter. As I looked around, shadows began forming into people again. Into men, women, and children. All the men were businessmen. All the women looked like stay-at-home mums. They were laughing at me. I decided I'll make them change their views. As the fire continued to wrap around me and melt my skin, I forced myself to laugh. Their faces turned horrific. They literally twisted into a tortured swirl. The fire leapt from me and onto them. The laughter turned into screams. My screams. The laughter I made continued to sound like a group of people rather than myself. I couldn't stop myself from laughing as they screamed. If you saw it yourself, you would agree it was hilarious. The laughing and the smoke made the air in my lungs dissipate. Everything went black and I felt my head painfully bang against the melting wooden floor. I woke up to human voices. I didn't want to open my eyes. I felt like a teenager again, not wanting to get out of bed for school. But that was so long ago. I finally opened my eyes and felt the rust on my body melt away. It looked like I was in an interrogation room. The voices I heard turned out to be owned by the shadows, except they were standing upright like their human forms. My groceries were dumped onto the table in front of me. All of a sudden, I felt water trickle down from a drain into the roof. Except it didn't fall. It looked like rising water, but from the ceiling. With it, my grocery bag wrapped around my head. My attempts to breathe were fruitless. When I awoke, I was in the middle of the woods. I was used to this being the end. I was used to seeing men in suits come out of hiding from behind the trees. I was used to them swimming into each other and forming an extremely tall and skinny man without a face. I was used to tentacles sprouting from his midsection. I was just used to them squirming toward me like serpents. I was used to the tentacles wrapping around me. I was used to the blackness enveloping my eyes and forcing me to have a vision. I was used to this cycle all too much. After it was over, I was used to how it would start again. Everything went still.